afternoon, everyone. We just had a fascinating discussion at lunch with Condoleezza Rice and her views about the current world situation. What I heard was that we have a worldwide problem. It's actually more complicated than it was after the Berlin Wall came down. If you all recall, we actually were thinking the Russians were not going to be the way they had been under the Soviet Union. China was not yet viewed as a national security threat. After 9/11, we thought we'd only be dealing with terrorism. Now we have terrorism and we have big power competition. So this is the broadest threat to the democratic world than we've had since before the Berlin Wall came down. I think Senate Republicans are going to take a good hard look at the supplemental request. We're probably going to have a number of changes we want to make in it. And of course, we want a very credible border security part of this bill. But speaking for myself, I do think it needs to be comprehensive. I think it needs to deal with all of these because they're all interrelated. I mean, what we have now is an axis of evil: China, Russia, and Iran. Iran taking care of funding all of these terrorists, being backed up by these two big countries. And you saw that President Xi said that he and the Chinese and Russians are going to be friends forever. So this is a big crisis that needs to be confronted by the most important democracy in the world.
I was among those who just returned from a trip to the Middle East, including a stop in Israel. And it's been 17 days now since the October 7th attack. But I will tell you that the video and images continue to come in. The barbaric, brutal, just absolutely brutal attacks were nothing less than despicable. These were heinous and just unbelievable violations of humanity. And so as we think about how to respond, clearly the Israelis can't abide having a terrorist organization living right on their border. Hamas has to be eliminated, and we should aid and support in every way possible the Israelis as they endeavor to do just that. And of course, we have to remember that the animating force behind the evil in that region of the world is, as the leader pointed out, Iran. It is Iran that finances more than 90% of the weaponry, training, and everything that Hamas does. They are the force behind their other proxy on the northern border of Israel, Hezbollah, and of course the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias that are attacking our troops in Syria and Iraq. This is an evil regime whose clear objective is to kill Jews and to wipe Israel off the map. That's the reality that is confronting the leaders in Israel right now. And Hamas, when they committed these incredibly violent and brutal acts, also preserved it, posted it on social media, celebrated it in front of the rest of the world. This evil has to be confronted. It has to be dealt with. And we need to do everything we can to support and defend our friend and our ally, Israel. And I hope that everyone in the neighborhood, countries in that area and beyond, will step up and do what they can to ensure that this kind of evil, this kind of terror, this reign of terror that the Israelis deal with on a daily basis is stopped in its tracks, and that region of the world can actually pursue peace and security for their people. And we ought to be doing everything we can to make And by the way, I would just simply, too, the administration needs to stay focused on getting the hostages out. There are a number of Americans who've been impacted by this, and we met with many families who are family members of hostages that are being held in Gaza today. And I would just urge the administration to work with our regional partners to ensure they're doing everything possible to get those hostages back safe and sound.
God bless Israel, and of course, God bless our Jewish brothers and sisters. So we saw on October 7th the savage attack of Hamas across the border. They broke through the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel. And we saw the savagery that followed after that attack and border crossing. And here in the United States, we have an open border, which terrorists and nations of special security interest are taking advantage of. We have seen over 8 million illegal entries into the United States since Joe Biden took office. Just in recent months, we have seen the number of those coming from special interest countries increase. 8,000 last month alone. And CBP says that's an increase of 1,000 individuals over August. We have seen 171 people on the terrorist watch list come across the border since Joe Biden took office. Israel had a secure border where terrorists advanced. Here in the United States, we have an open border where terrorists advance. We can't continue to allow people to illegally enter our country, putting our own national security at risk. And I'm asking the administration to step up. Don't forget our friends in Israel. Don't forget them. Stay on this. But also, let's make sure we learn from this lesson and secure our own border and protect our own citizens right here in the homeland.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to also reemphasize what Senator Ernst has said in terms of our own southern border. We saw what happened in Israel with a border that was supposedly secure, and we saw with the will of the reign of terror how those borders can be broken through. And so when we got the numbers, interestingly, the numbers were dumped on Friday night at about 5 or 6 o'clock. For the month of September, 269,735 illegal encounters on our southern border, the highest month ever in the history of our keeping the statistics of illegal encounters at our southern border. The highest number ever. Over, as she said, over 5 million during the course of the Biden administration, 2.4 over this year alone. How many times have we at this podium, all of us, said to the president and those that are in ability to make a decision and to change policy, how many times have we talked about this with no reasonable policy or change of policy to change this behavior? And now we have documented terrorists coming through. The American people are very upset about this in every state. Every state's a border state now, and we all know how much this is influenced. So when we look at what this supplemental is going to do, the last thing we should be doing in border policy is making more beds available or making it easier to go faster through the border so that you can wait another 8 to 9 years to get your asylum claim. That is a non-starter for all of us. This needs to be deterrence, needs to be a change in policy. It needs to be make sure that what we're going to do is see these numbers come down, not just by a little bit, but very, very measurably. So I look forward to the negotiations that are going to be going forward. Certainly all of these things are exceedingly important, but today this focus on our southern border is something that we cannot lose sight of in terms of how this affects our own national security, but the effects that it has globally as well. Thank you.
So the State Department has designated the following 4 countries as state sponsors of terror: Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria. Since October 1st, hundreds of individuals from these 4 countries alone have entered the United States that we know of. In September, it was more than 1,000 been encountered by Border Patrol from those 4 countries labeled as state sponsors of terror by our country. A memo from the San Diego Border Patrol Intelligence Division just this past Friday warned of Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists crossing the border. Here's the warning went out Friday. Foreign fighters of Israel-Hamas conflict may potentially be encountered at the southwest border. And as Senator Capito just mentioned, as well as Senator Ernst, we're seeing an all-time record level of encounters in the month of September, which finished up the fiscal year, setting an all-time record for any fiscal year for encounters by Border Patrol under Joe Biden. And that doesn't even include the 1.6 million known gotaways, as well as how many unknown gotaways. We don't even have a number for that. Where are the people from these hotbeds of terror? The administration does not know. It is only a matter of time before something happens in our country in terms of a terror attack on our soil. This is no longer just an immigration issue. This is a national security crisis in the making. Not only is it shattering previous records in this administration, but showing a chilling trend that potential terror threats are using Biden's open border as an opportunity to flood our country. And look, that supplemental the Biden administration proposed up here is a joke. It is not about throwing more money at the border. We've got to slow the flow. It's about changing the policies. They don't need a lot more money in the southern border. They need to change the policies to remove the incentives to come across our southern border. Joe Biden and Senate Democrats need to get serious about the safety of our country, our national security, and secure the southern border before it's too late.
Yeah, I would just add one thing before taking questions. It's pretty clear that the supplemental that was sent up is just a starting place. We're going to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. As you can see, there's a lot of passion among our members about having a credible border security provision in there, and we're going to make other changes as well. Alex?
What is your expected timeline for negotiating a supplemental here in the Senate? And if the border security provisions slow it down, would you be open to moving Israel money separately?
Well, I'll take the last first. I along with Secretary Condoleezza Rice and the administration, feel that this is a worldwide problem and needs to be dealt with entirely, not in pieces. In terms of the timing, that'll be up to Senator Schumer. The Appropriations Committee is going to have a hearing next week. Our members, now that we have the package, are scrubbing it for recommended changes. And I think it will, except for the fact that it's worldwide, I think it'll end up having a number of Republican changes.
Leader McConnell, now that Secretary or Jack Lew has had his confirmation hearing, will you be supporting his nomination to be ambassador of Israel?
Yeah, I don't have any announcement to make on that today.
Leader McConnell, there's great concern right now that this conflict is going to expand into a regional war, possibly dragging in the U.S. along with it. There's already contingency plans being worked out to bring American citizens home from the region. Are you worried about that? And do you support sending in U.S. troops if Israel needs it?
Well, first, your question confirms what I just said earlier. I view this as a worldwide problem, both the terrorism problem that we're experiencing in Israel and occasionally against us, and a big power problem in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, and with the Chinese linking up with the Russians. That's a fairly new thing. And we have a worldwide problem that requires a worldwide response drafted by us. And that's one thing that conceptually, I agree that we have a worldwide problem. In terms of the details of it, we're going to have a lot of recommendations.
But aside from an aid package,
Yeah.
what about U.S. troops?
Yeah, I'm not going to. It depends on conditions. I have no way of projecting what might be needed down the way.
Leader McConnell, who is going to be leading the negotiations regarding the border with in terms of the supplemental? Do you have like a team that you are entrusting with that?
Well, we have a group that Senator Thune has been meeting with, trying to come up with what we think is a credible border proposal. I can tell you what it probably will not be is sending a bunch of money to Chicago and New York. We want to do something about the problems at the border.
Delivered our message of support for the people of Israel. We stand with Israel. And I must emphasize, Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas hates Israel and doesn't care about the Palestinian people. They will use them as shields. They will use them to protect their sensitive sites. So this is not a battle between the state of Israel and the people of Palestine. It's an attempt to destroy a sadistic group of terrorists. And we have an obligation to protect innocent lives that have been caught up in this. We have an obligation to work with the international community to provide, we hope, relief for the Palestinians in Gaza so that they can get out of the fighting zone, so that they can find some type of shelter and food. We're encouraged that they've opened up the humanitarian corridor. We thanked President Sisi and Prime Minister Netanyahu for their efforts to open up that corridor, so supplies are now flowing in. More must be done. And then we have to obviously assist the state of Israel in their efforts to degrade and ultimately destroy Hamas. And those efforts continue. We also had the opportunity to travel to Saudi Arabia and meet with the Crown Prince, and in Egypt with President Sisi. They are both aware of the dangers to Israel and to the Palestinians and also to the whole region of the Middle East. They want, and we encourage them, to try to lead international efforts to provide support for the Palestinian people, to provide areas of refuge, to do those things that will help the Palestinian people through this very difficult moment. The United States is committed to help Israel. We have sent forces in to deter the expansion of this war outside the boundaries of Israel and Gaza. Our aircraft carriers, our aircraft, they're designed to send a signal that no nation in that region should try to take advantage of this terrible moment. And of course, we have to pass the $14.3 billion to Israel. That is necessary support. It will allow them to protect themselves and also to signal again to the region that they are ready to take on any other potential axes of attack, and that will be a deterrent effect too. We will remain steadfast in our support to Israel.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Cardin.
Well, first, Senator Schumer, thank you for your leadership during these extremely challenging times and for the manner in which we will be considering the supplemental appropriation. And to my colleague, Senator Reed, the two of us shared something that we thought we would never see in our lifetime, the depravity and brutality that Hamas demonstrated against Israel. What we saw in videos and film and faces, conversations with the families of the hostages, it brought depravity to a new low against civilization. It just shocks you to see what they did to people and what they're continuing to do. We were resolved to help Israel. That feeling is even deeper today as a result of our visit. Israel has a right and obligation to defend itself. Hamas must be destroyed. It's evil. The Palestinians cannot survive with Hamas. It's in their interest. We call it Hamas to be similar to ISIS. I personally think some of the things they did is even worse than what ISIS did. We have to rid that region and the world from such a terrorist organization. In doing that, we have to provide the help Israel needs. This supplemental does that. It provides additional resources for air defense. We know how many missiles were shot against Israel. And we know that Iron Dome was successful in bringing down most of them. They need to have the resources to protect themselves against another round of missile attacks. Senator Reid mentioned properly, we're doing everything we can to stop the spread of this conflict. I want to congratulate President Biden for his strong leadership. We heard that over and over again in Israel, the strength of American leadership under President Biden. We've made it clear to Iran and its proxies that it should not even consider taking advantage of this circumstances against Israel. We recognize the risks from the northern border with Hezbollah. Israel needs to be prepared. This supplemental is critically important so that they have the defense if more missiles are fired into the country. It also provides the resources in order to even perfect air defense greater than it is today. It provides the resources for America to replenish its own supplies that it's made available to Israel. And yes, as Senator Reid says, it provides the help for the innocent victims being caught in this conflict. I was impressed in my conversations with the Israelis, their sensitivity, as I knew was there, to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the innocent victims, the Palestinians that are trying to leave. Hamas is trying to stop them. Hamas is using them as shields, human shields. We need to do everything we can to help, including the supply of humanitarian assistance. We're pleased to see the trucks are getting in, and we hope they're not being diverted. In this supplemental is help for Ukraine. Ukraine needs this money yesterday. We've got to get that done immediately. That's our front line in defense against Russia's aggression to bring down the democratic Europe. We need to make sure they have the resources they need and the leadership from America to keep this strong coalition together, to give them the resources they need. And in the Indo-Pacific, we have to make it clear to the PRC, to China, that they cannot use aggression. And one way to do that is to show China that we stand with the democratic regimes that are in the region and are prepared to give them what they need to defend their territorial integrity. This is a critical moment for the United States and the free world. This supplemental is critically important that we get it done as soon as possible to support democracy around the world. I'll do everything I possibly can to get this supplemental passed.
And finally, last but certainly not least, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. I'm pleased to join my colleagues and to support the sentiments that they have already echoed, particularly framing it the way Senator Cardin just did. This supplemental bill is about whether we're going to be on the side of the civilized world or on the side of those terrorist organizations, those autocratic dictators who represent depravity. In its entirety, this package would bolster our own national security in so many ways. As Ukrainians and Israelis fight against terror and destruction, it's important that the United States continues to step up and support them. Last year, I met with a group of Ukrainian women soldiers, and one of the things they said to me has stuck with me. They said, "Give us the weapons so that we can fight the Russians so that you don't have to." Well, this morning I met with one of those women again, a soldier named Andriana. She was critically injured last year because she was in a civilian vehicle and Ukraine doesn't have enough armored cars to protect themselves from Russian attacks. The vehicle she was in was hit by a Russian mine. She was traumatically injured, spent 9 months in the hospital. She had to learn to walk again. She walked into my office today. And what she told me is that she intends to return to the fight. She's going back to her unit. And we talked about why. And she said, because Ukraine is fighting for its life. In fact, we joked about the fact that Ukraine's motto is very much like New Hampshire's motto. You know, I'm from the live free or die state. Well, Ukraine's motto is freedom or death. And she said, we're in a fight right now for freedom, and we're willing to die for that freedom. As President Zelensky said when he was here, he said, the United States is giving money and weapons, and we are giving lives. If we let the destructive authoritarian leaders like Putin dictate the future of sovereign countries, if we let terrorist organizations like Hamas determine what we're going to do in the free world, we are going to all lose that battle. That's why I strongly support continued assistance to Ukraine. And make no mistake, our adversaries, whether it's China or Iran, are watching how we respond to the war in Ukraine. They are watching what we do in the Middle East with Israel. It's why this request for the supplemental includes support for Taiwan in the face of the aggression of the PRC. Our enduring support for Ukraine sends a strong message to other dictators that the United States is going to stand on the side of democracy. And there is a nexus between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel. If we're concerned about Iran, we need to support Ukraine and Israel and the supplemental, because there have been reports that Iran, which already supplies Russia with lethal drones that they're using in Ukraine, is also backing Hamas, as we all know, in their brutal campaign of terror. So I know that my colleagues have talked at great length about the steadfast support for Israel, and I would just echo their sentiments entirely. Last, I want to raise one issue that's also part of the supplemental. That's about our own security, and that's what's happening at the border. The President's request would add 1,300 Border Patrol agents, 375 immigration judge teams, and 1,600 asylum officers. It would fund over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect fentanyl. And for those of us who live in states that are still being dramatically affected by the opioid epidemic and by fentanyl, that is an investment that is absolutely critical to try and get the fentanyl epidemic under control. So the world is watching what we're doing. I hope that as a Congress, we're going to step up in a bipartisan way and pass the supplemental and show the world that we are on the side of fighting oppression, of fighting dictators, of fighting terrorist organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, my three excellent colleagues. Yes, later over there. Look, first and above all, anything done on border has to be bipartisan, or the whole supplemental will get bollocksed up. I believe that Senator Biden's proposal, which is funding, will do the most to get us at the fentanyl crisis that Jean talked about and dealing with the problems at the border. We are not for policy changes. Yes.
With the supplemental now, is there any chance you can pass all the appropriation bills before November 17th?
Well, look, we're doing our very best. We reached agreement, as you may have heard this morning, on the 3 supplemental bills that have come up. They will be, once they pass, and they will pass, the only bipartisan bills passed. The House has passed 4 bills. They're totally partisan. They're filled with poison pills. They go way below the agreements that were made previously, and they're non-starters. So we're going to do everything we can to pass as many of the bills as we can. Yes.
The federal deficit just hit a record outside of the COVID years. Do you have any concerns about more spending at a time like this?
Well, the bottom line is that we Democrats have done more in terms of reduction of deficit than others. In the IRA, for instance, for every dollar we spent, we saved a dollar. I've never seen the Republicans do that when they do tax cuts. Yes, Bolton.
Since 2021, the Biden administration tried to restore or revive elements of the JCPOA with Iran through Qatar and intermediaries. Would you like to see the Biden administration make a course correction in terms of diplomatic outreach to Iran?
My position on the JCPOA is clear. I voted against it early on because I think one of the main reasons is it didn't have enough to deter Iran from funding terrorism around the globe, and I still believe that. Yes.
What about people crossing the border, dangerous people? There was this memo out that your colleague Senator Daines showed from Border Patrol San Diego that Hezbollah, Hamas, you're talking a lot about fentanyl, which is a problem. What about
The best thing to do is pass the Biden proposal on the border. It will do more to stop the problems of fentanyl and other issues than any other. Thank you, everybody.